that is understood now across the globe, that the two countries are on a different trajectory in terms of current and future growth paths, in terms of national power. Uh, so I don't think there is any room or any, let's say, impression in the world that you need to treat these two together on par.
You're on the gist on StratNewsGlobal. I'm Surya Gangadharan. Welcome to another edition of the gist. My guest is Pankaj Saran, former Deputy National Security Advisor, former Ambassador to Russia, and he's currently with NatStrat, a think tank. He was part of the delegation and all-party delegation that went to Europe, visiting no less than 6 European countries. Ambassador Saran, I'm glad to have you.
Thank you so much, Surya. Pleasure to be with you.
I understand you presented a report to the government on. There was a meeting with the PM, I recall. There were some reports to that. Broadly, what are we? What were your reactions from your visit to this place? What do you read from it?
Yeah, look, I think it was a fairly extraordinary exercise. It was very intense, very mission oriented, a lot of energy, and I don't think we've ever had such a scale of outreach diplomatically at the level of the members of parliament by India, even after the parliament attack of 2001, where we
Hmm.
sent out delegations. It was not at this scale. So the sheer scale of this outreach was unprecedented, and we should see this outreach as being an intrinsic part of Operation Sindoor, because Operation Sindoor has a multifaceted dimensions to it. The diplomatic outreach is one of those. And so the teams were farmed out across the world to key capitals. Uh, for example, the team to Europe consisted of very, very experienced parliamentarians, people with 25, 30 years of experience in parliament, different political parties, different regions of India. So the picture that they conveyed was very compelling. And when we were overseas, moving from capital to capital, they all spoke the same language and admitted, in fact, very transparently that when they are back home, they have political differences, but when it comes to issues of national security, they speak with one voice. Now, this resonated a lot with European countries and interlocutors only because of the fact that they understand the meaning of parliamentary democracy. And so they understood what it means to have a multi party delegation moving across. And I would say in the meeting the Prime Minister hosted for all the delegations, it was a very convivial, interactive opportunity for individual members, delegation leaders to convey their impressions to the Prime Minister. I think he was obviously very satisfied with what he heard. And the general sense, by exchanging notes with all the delegations, was that the mission has been accomplished. The message has gone down across the length and breadth about what we wanted to convey.
Mhm. So I presume there will be a formal report at some point to the MEA, perhaps.
I don't know. I mean, that's some detail which the MEA will have to answer. But I think the feedback has been given. Maybe there will be more formal reports involved, uh, etc. So we'll see. I mean, that of course is something which might happen.
Mhm. Ambassador Saran, one of the points that came up in the wake of Sindoor was the what they call the false equivalence. India and a terror state like Pakistan being equated, treated as if they are the same level, and the fact that Pakistan is a terror state that has persistently followed this path is something that is tends to get glossed over. What was your uh, reaction to this in Europe? Did you also bring this up?
Well, let me begin by saying to you one thing, that when the United States took anti terror operations against Afghanistan or Iraq, or for that matter, against Iran, you cannot claim that by this action it has established equivalence with Iran or with Iraq or with Afghanistan. The
Right.
fact is that if there is a terrorist camp or infrastructure which you want to target and it happens to be in the territory of Pakistan, that does not follow that you become an equivalent state to Pakistan. Yes,
Hmm.
because of the kinetic action, there is that equivalence which is logical and inevitable. But when you talk of equivalence, I'm sure you mean in many other different ways. But obviously, when you are attacking the terrorist infrastructure in a country, that country by nature becomes a subject of conversation and becomes a subject of study by the country that has been a sufferer or a victim of terrorism. So, equivalence in that context, yes, obviously, because you are the terrorist infrastructure was in Pakistan, and we are talking about Pakistan. We are not talking about some imaginary state. There is a real state out there whose entire kind of leadership and political and military structure is geared and hardwired with the use of terrorism as an instrument of state policy about which it actually has it does not hide itself from that, nor does it have any kind of apologies for using terror, particularly against India. So, but minus all of this, there is no equivalence, and I don't think anyone in Europe tried to suggest to us, or we heard anything from their interventions which would suggest to us that we are somehow being dragged down to the level of Pakistan. I think that was certainly not the impression we got in any of the capitals. So,
Hmm.
and of course, we ourselves actually made this point to them that look, we are coming to you and talking about Pakistan not because there is some hyphenation, but simply because of the fact of what I told you. Minus all of that, the power differential and the resource differential and everything else is so vast that there can be no equivalence. I mean, it's impossible. So that is understood now across the globe that the two countries are on a different trajectory in terms of current and future growth paths, in terms of national power. So I don't think there is any room or any let's say impression in the world that you need to treat these two together on par. That may have been the situation 20, 30 years ago, but it is absolutely not true today.
Do you, I mean, you've been in government many, many years, and do you feel that Pakistan's presence in various Western alliances in the past and its alliance with the Americans in Afghanistan and so on, to some extent, perhaps even today, may have contributed to this tendency on the part of some countries to kind of maybe gloss over what Pakistan does?
No, the problem of double standards is historic. I mean, this whole question of a good terrorist or a bad terrorist, or you have a Jekyll and Hyde kind of personality where you try to ingratiate yourself and curry favor with some countries, largely in the West, to deflect and to remove pressure from you, whereas you keep the tap open when it comes to India,
Yeah.
is now a well-established Pakistani policy, and I think people understand this very well in Europe. They see the point because they have themselves suffered, and this is the point which they made and we made that whenever you examine deeply any major terrorist attack in the world, particularly in the West, the origins invariably, in one form or the other, The origin of all of those is Pakistan. So, uh, Pakistan's dalliance with the West, or let's say the other way around, has to some extent blinded them to Pakistan's complicity and Pakistan's role in hosting terrorism, and which is why you saw some actions that were taken, let's say, on the financing of terror
Yeah.
under the FATF. You saw some other sanctions against Pakistan. But the fact is that uh, this is not going to be enough. And this was the message which we conveyed, that the war on terrorism has to continue, must continue. It is a thankless job because you have to be alert all the time, and at the end of the day, we are all victims of terror. It doesn't matter whether you're in Europe or in India or in Saudi Arabia or in any part of Southeast Asia. The fact is, this is a scourge. It has no boundaries. It is an ideology. It has tentacles spread across regions, and it has to be dealt with holistically.
Hmm. Is there a difference between the way, say, Pakistan is viewed in maybe Germany, from perhaps in Europe, from perhaps in the UK?
Look, a lot of these countries have their exposure to Pakistan, apart from the terrorist attacks on their soil. A lot of their exposure is through the Pakistani expatriate community in these
Hmm.
countries. Now, the strength of this community varies from country to country. Germany has a Pakistani community, France also has, but their historical experiences have been different. Um, France has itself been a fairly, serious victim of terrorism, so it
Yeah.
has much less tolerance for terrorism. It understands the problems that it faces from Islamic radicalization, from extremism, not just from Pakistan, but also the Middle East and West Asia and so on.
Hmm.
Germany also has faced terror incidents. In fact, we saw the latest European Union report on terrorism for the year 2023-24, which clearly showed, it's an official report, there's a huge the number of terrorist incidents in Europe has grown by 3 or 4 times last year. And a lot of the incidents have been traced back to either Pakistani actors
Hmm.
or some other countries. So the appetite is very little for terrorism. There are variations among individual countries on their approaches, but broadly speaking, they have a European strategy to deal with terrorism.
Hmm.
I think I would say that both France, if you talk about France, if you talk about Germany, uh, they seem to have zero tolerance for terrorism. Uh, they are determined to not allow radicalization. The only thing is, France is a much more of a multicultural society than Germany,
Hmm.
so that influences its approach. They have, I think, better uh, domain knowledge about uh, whole problem of radicalization than Germany. Although what we learnt in Germany was that apart from the problems from the Turkish migrants, they are facing very serious problems following the influx of about 1 million refugees from Syria in
Hmm.
2015-16. So, and their experience of assimilation of these Syrian migrants has not been good at all. So they're very worried. So
Hmm.
if you ask me about the worry and the concern, is very high.
Hmm. But I mean, just in England, for instance, yesterday there was a meeting of some parliamentary panel on Kashmir. Do you get the sense that in the UK there may be this residual, especially now under a Labour government? Could there be some of that old India thing coming back? Kashmir, Pakistan, hyphenation, hyphenation.
Well, it wouldn't be surprising, would it? Because
Hmm.
the genesis of all our problems is the UK. So, and
Yeah.
they know it. And the genesis of most global problems in the world has been the imperfections of the colonial era and what they left when the whole, project of colonialism was kind of destroyed. So, in that wake of all of that, um, they have left behind problems which now we are grappling with. So that's clearly the case. I mean, there is no, I think, debate on that. But having said all of that, frankly, in our discussions, we did not get any signaling from anyone in the UK about Kashmir or the suggestion that India should somehow address the Kashmir issue, quote unquote, and try to
Mm.
solve it, or to project it, or to suggest that it is somehow a root cause of the whole conflict. And I think that is a huge change from the past that no one, even tangentially, referred or asked us or suggested to us that we need to talk Kashmir with Pakistan. That's a big change. But having said all of that, of course, there are groups and lobbyists and interested parties in the UK Parliament, British Parliament, again, uh, instigated by their own constituencies, which keep this issue alive with the full support of the Pakistani state and the intelligence agencies. So we live with that, but the takeaway, as I said, was that no one really mentioned it, and of course we didn't mention it either. And the focus uh, was entirely on the problem of terrorism rather than anything else.
So, just step back from all this. Pakistan does tend to get away with a lot, doesn't it? Leave aside this delegation and all that. When you look at it, just step back and take a broad look. Pakistan does tend to get away with some of these things, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it has got away with a lot, but
Yeah,
it's actually quite remarkable that here you have a country which has serious problems with today's Afghanistan. Uh, I mean, and my favorite example is Iran. You will remember in January 2024,
yeah,
Iran launched missile and drone attacks on the Jaish-e-Adal camps in Baluchistan,
yeah. Mm,
accusing the Jaish-e-Adal, a Sunni Muslim terrorist organization, of being promoted and protected by the Pakistanis to destabilize Iran. This was January.
yeah.
And within 2 days, the Pakistanis launched retaliatory missile and drone attacks on Iran.
Mm,
So, how is it that you have this 100% record of every neighbor of yours being worried
yes.
about who you are and what you do? And
Mm,
this also includes Tajikistan. And this also
mm,
includes the Chinese, by the way. I mean, which is
yeah.
why they seem to be currying favor all the time and trying to buy peace with Pakistan. So we are not alone. But yet, you're right. Pakistan gets away, but but also in the same breath, let us not forget that while at a political or a strategic level, it seems to be getting away literally with murder.
Mhm.
On the other hand, its economy over the last 10 years or more has virtually ground to a halt. So, in some ways, Pakistan and its people are paying the price for the policy they have chosen of leveraging maybe their location, leveraging their or weaponizing Islamic and terror groups, using them as they need, as levers of influence, of bargaining, as bargaining chips in a bigger game, trying to curry favor with the Americans, with the Russians, with the Chinese. So while they may be playing all these different games on the chessboard, on the region, the fact of the matter is there is very, very serious collateral damage inside their own country. and they are also, rather, their citizens are facing very serious problems of reputational loss in Europe, in the Gulf kingdoms, in the United States. And it is a known fact that if you talk about the Gulf or you talk about Europe, and if a receiving country has to choose between absorbing an Indian immigrant or an Indian worker and a Pakistani immigrant or a Pakistani worker, the choice is crystal clear. And this applies above all to those very Islamic countries in the Gulf who Pakistan regards as their best friends. So, reputational loss, the loss of national power. So, we have a situation where you have a kind of a hollowed out country armed to the teeth and
Hmm.
arming itself more. So I don't know whether you can call this as getting away with whatever it wishes. I think it's paying a
Hmm.
serious price. And my own view is that if it continues down this path, it is going to get worse and worse uh, because as long as you're controlled by the army and its affiliates, uh, it's in the genetic code that you will have a certain orientation and a certain set of priorities,
Yeah.
which will not sit with uh, the priorities of the vast majority of the people.
Hmm. It used to be said in the past that Pakistan's rather India centric foreign and strategic policy made it easier for it to go out there and tell the world. In that sense, our job is a little tougher because we have far bigger challenges and perhaps many more challenges. Would you agree with that?
I think this delegation displayed a new approach to this question of what you have said. And this was very much part of the intellectual logic of Operation Sindoor, that this time around we are not going to hesitate on any front, whether it is to take military action against terrorist infrastructure or whether it is to play front foot forward on the diplomatic front.
Hmm.
So we are not going to hold back on the fear that we might be equated with Pakistan or
Hmm.
that we will be seen to be too preoccupied with Pakistan. So this constitutes a new approach towards the Pakistan problem, where you go forward and say, I'm going to do it. And in a sense, what you're doing is you're challenging Pakistan. Let us see how much you can, quote unquote, internationalize the problems that you think you have with India and the problems you think are the cause of the India Pakistan relationship. In other words, Kashmir or this or that. And frankly, we've called out their bluff both on the military side and on the diplomatic side. So we've had a pretty fairly smooth sailing in this particular diplomatic outreach. Uh, I think every delegation has come back uh, with the feedback that they were all listened to. There was no real equivalence suggested.
Yeah.
There was no prescription given. In fact, in my group in Europe, I think a lot of people appreciated the restraint India showed
Hmm.
by stopping in a few days' time, not allowing this to linger, and also recognizing your right to self defense.
Last question. In delegations of this kind, are people given specific responsibilities? Perhaps somebody says something, another person is required to say something else. How does it work?
Well, look, I don't think there's any like a rule or a convention. In
Hmm.
my group, for example, it was very kind of flowed very naturally. We had a member of parliament from Jammu, so he obviously spoke about the situation in Kashmir, in Jammu. We had a member of parliament from Punjab, so he spoke at length on the problems faced in Punjab because of
Hmm.
Pakistan. So we had other members of parliament. So everyone spoke based on their ground level knowledge and experience, and the whole presentation was free flowing, was natural, and very, very convincing. Because remember, these are members of parliament.
Yeah.
They have, they are absolutely masters at how they communicate.
Mm.
That's how they have become members of parliament. And so that's how it worked. I mean, there was no real kind of ironclad arrangement. But yes, there was some internal briefing, there was a discussion, there was a strategy. But the whole thing I would see as an organic whole rather than disjointed individual parts which were trying to put together. So it flowed very naturally, and at the end of the day, the other side got a full, 360-degree view of the whole problem, the multi-dimensional problem. In fact, our members of parliament from Kashmir and Punjab spoke at length also on the Indus Water
Mhm.
Treaty issue.
Okay. Any other outreach plans, sir, that you're aware of? I know the External Affairs Minister is somewhere in Europe now.
Well, I'm not sure whether it will be for Operation Sindoor, but one of the feedbacks which almost everyone came back with was that all countries want much more parliamentary level interaction with
Okay.
Indian parliamentarians. They were
Mhm.
extremely happy to interact with parliamentarians from India. And so this is the kind of net conclusion or recommendation of all our parliamentarians, that there should be much more of these kind of interactions, not just on this current crisis, but even
Mhm.
other issues. Like when we went in Europe, there was a lot of discussion on the trade aspects, on India's
Mhm.
global role, going well beyond Pakistan. So, in many instances, the discussion on Pakistan was only a fraction of the much
Mhm.
bigger discussion on the global situation, the global order, the role India can play, the bilateral relationship, the contribution of the Indian diaspora to those economies. So the topics themselves reflected changing realities as far as India is concerned.
Mhm. On that note, Ambassador, that positive note, thank you very much for that perspective and the insight we have gotten to how these delegations were received overseas. Thank you very much. Great talking to you.
Thank you, Surya. Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's all we have on this broadcast. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media. Thank you very much. Good day.